I'm Todd Thompson, President and CEO of the Greater Pensacola Chamber of Commerce, and right off the bat, I just want to say thank you for being here this morning. I really appreciate all of the business organizations that have agreed to be a part of this conversation today. It's going to be an interesting morning, be some education, some experiences that are going to be shared, and then hopefully we can discuss some solutions at the end. So again, thank you to all of you being here. Thank you to Connie Bookman and Allison Patton, who came to me about 5-6 months ago and said, hey, we've got a lot going on with homelessness and panhandling and affordable housing, and all of these issues are interrelated. Can we have a conversation with the business community and see if we can work together on we're never going to solve these issues, but we can come up with some solutions that'll improve and help our, not just downtown, but really our county as a whole. So with that, thank you so much. And I am going to hand it over to Ms. Liz.
That's blinding. Good morning, everybody. I guess I'll just start by introducing myself. I think I've met almost everybody in this room. If not, I look forward to meeting with you. I am the governmental liaison at Escambia County. What does that mean? I'm still determining that. So I've been with the county now for about 4 years, and I've held 3 different job titles. I started there as a program coordinator, where I assisted the assistant county administrators and dealt mainly with FEMA. And ensuring that our community can recapture all of the expenses of any natural disasters that come to our area. Then I got nosy and I started asking questions about things I heard at the county, and I became a special projects manager. I heard about some homeless funding that the county had and kind of got involved in that. And then I started doing grants. You probably have heard that we just got about $72 million worth of Rebuild Florida Hurricane Sally grants. A portion of that is for our new ECAT system. There's some for stormwater, and we also have some homeless funding. So I have moved to a governmental liaison. I work very closely with Councilwoman Allison, Ms. Connie, the mayor, really just trying to build that collaboration with our nonprofits throughout the community. So that is kind of why I'm here. So there's 2 pieces that I'm going to really just talk to you folks about, and it's really surveys. We've done 2 different surveys in the community. The first one I'm going to go through is just a survey asking the community where they think we should be spending our homeless or nonprofit funding. What populations do they see that are most vulnerable, and where should we be spending and focusing that funding on? So the first slide that I have here is really who responded to the survey. So it's great to do a survey, but if you don't have anybody responding to it, the results kind of don't really mean a lot. So for this particular survey, we actually had over 480 citizens respond to this. This was a survey that was done to both Santa Rosa and Escambia County. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the continuum of care in our area, but the continuum of care actually is responsible for both of those counties, so we did include them in this particular survey. So who responded? 58.8% Escambia County, 41.3% were Santa Rosa. So we had a pretty good split between those 2 entities actually responding to this survey, which is great. Of that, 69.6% was white and Caucasian, 15% African American, and then the rest kind of fell into smaller little categories. The majority of the folks that did respond to the survey were between the ages of 40 to 64, and then the other was the older population, over 65, that actually took the time to respond to the survey. We did make sure that we had the survey available online for the younger generations. We also had available in libraries, community centers for those folks that might not have access, just to make sure that everybody had the chance to respond to the particular survey. And majority was female that responded, and then it was about 25% of the male population that responded. I did include one chart in here, and I included this chart in here because I think it is an amazing representation of how well this survey reached our population. And this is on income-based. So one of the questions we asked when we put this survey out is, what is your income range? So we had anything from less to 20%, to over 100,000 to I don't want to answer. And if you just visually look at this chart, you will see that we received responses pretty equally from all income levels in both Escambia County and Santa Rosa, which means we did a fabulous job getting this out to our community and reaching everybody that we did need to reach to get the results that we needed. So what did we ask? This next slide just kind of talks about what we were trying to get from the community, how we should spend the money. The first question that we asked is, what is the population that actually stands out as a priority? So when you look at the homeless people, where do you think we should focus? The number one answer was families requiring services or housing assistance to prevent homelessness. I'm sure every single person in this room either knows somebody or has met somebody that has some kind of housing instability at this point in time. Rents right now is outrageous. If you're a single mom on minimum wage, it's almost impossible to find a place to live unless you have roommates. So that was the biggest thing, is preventing those folks from becoming homeless, obviously to not increase our homeless population. The other two, 25% was unsheltered homeless population, and 19% was unsheltered homeless population involving our youth. I see someone here that works with our youth very closely. We got a report over 1,000, and I don't know the exact number, over 2,000, 2,000? Oh, okay, ish. 1,900. I feel like I'm doing an auction with a bid out there. So about 1,900 of our youth are homeless. If you think about that for a second, that's scary. Those are our future homeless people on our streets. So homeless in the school system might be a little bit different than what you're thinking. It's not necessarily living in a tent in an encampment. It sure could be. It could be living in a shelter. It could be living in my car. It could be couch surfing. But these are children that don't have stable homes. So that's kind of the way that the school system looks at it. Obviously, with those children that are homeless, there's probably parents, there might not be parents. There's all kinds of situations in there. So that definitely is a big one. The second thing we asked is, which population do you believe is the most need of additional assistance to secure permanent housing? 30.6% said families requiring services or housing assistance to prevent. Again, they're in the prevention mode, which is also very important to make sure that we don't have those folks that are in stable housing becoming homeless. The second one is 23.5 households who require services or housing assistance to avoid homelessness. 17% services for those fleeing domestic violence, and 14% of services for currently homeless and those that are homeless and currently residing in shelters. The last one, what do you believe is the greatest funding need for shelter facilities? 29% cost for increasing existing shelter capacities and operations, 28% for costs for development of new shelters, 24% costs related to offering or increasing access to supportive services. And supportive services could be anything. It could be food, it could be clothing, it could be sheltering, it could be mental health assistance, it could be counseling, it could be, there's all kinds of things that really fall in that supportive services that our nonprofits actually offer. But as you probably know, nonprofits don't have an unlimited number of funding. So funding a lot of times is a challenge for those folks. So being able to provide additional funding for them to be able to do what they do best. So the next slide is, what did you say? So we sent out the survey to the business community. And the first thing I want to point out is we did have 85 business folks respond to this survey. And that tells me one thing. You guys notice. You notice that there's homeless. You know that it affects our community, and you know that it affects your businesses. So first, I want to say thank you for taking the time to actually fill out that survey. So what the majority of you said, what do you believe is the primary cause of homelessness? The top thing you all said, 35%, was drug and alcohol addiction. I can honestly say that I could probably survey just about anybody and get that answer, other than our nonprofits, other than the folks that are front-facing, but that typically is the way people see homelessness, is that being the issue. Same with the second one. Mental health, I think, came in at 29%. Those are the people that we probably see the most. So those numbers are not shocking. The lack of affordable housing and the hard times came in at about 12, 15%, so those were pretty close. The second one, the has homelessness impacted your business? 34% of you said no, and almost 66% of you said yes. Oh yeah, sorry. Good call. Yes, I do. Okay, so yes. So when we asked yes, we asked how. How is it affecting your businesses? And we had some pretty consistent answers there, and I don't think anybody in this room probably would disagree with them. And even probably some of you who said no, once you hear these answers, would be like, oh yeah, well, I guess I have been affected by that. But some of the reasons, panhandling was a huge one. People sleeping on sidewalks, parking lots, outside of your businesses, which we know are going to defer people from wanting to come in or even approach your business sometimes. Sometimes that just makes people turn around and go somewhere else. Trash, sanitation issues, vandalism of property, entering businesses to use bathrooms. A lot of you said they'll just stay in there and end up showering or trying to bathe themselves, asking for money or even sometimes stealing. Trespassing on private property or empty buildings. There were a couple of you that said that you had abandoned buildings that you were looking to try to lease or rent, and sometimes you would go in there and there would end up being homeless folks in there. And then lack of affordable housing for students and employees to come to the area. The next one, who do you feel is most responsible? And I'm going to emphasize most here. It wasn't who do you feel is responsible for addressing homeless. It was most. Almost 55% of you said the government. 12.9% of you said the community. 10.7% said you don't know. Very honest answer. Most people probably don't know who should do it. Nonprofits was 8.6%, which is a little bit shocking because that is their realm. That is what they do. And then everyone, 8.6%. So those kind of were the different percentages. Government, I would say I'm not shocked that that's the number one answer. I think if you really knew about all the restraints that government has to go through to implement anything or what the laws and things like that were, you probably would have a different answer. I think you probably would also agree that government has no business doing certain things like running a shelter. That shouldn't be a government job. But very honest answers and honestly not surprising. So the second half of the survey, I'm going the wrong way. All right, so solutions. So I've only put the top 5 here because they were the most common, but solutions that you propose for our local community, consolidated approach, coordinated effort, and coalition is the number one answer. And that is why you guys are all sitting here today, because that is exactly what we are trying to do, is to get a collaboration, everybody working together, everybody has their piece. Everything that needs to take place is not going to be able to be done by one entity. Create more affordable housing, additional shelter and transitional housing options, supporting nonprofits, enforce ordinances, laws, etc., and stop panhandling. Again, panhandling came up a lot. So those are kind of the ideas that you folks had. The next one is, what should the role of local businesses and organizations be in solving homelessness? This one was a tough one for me. So the responses that we got is be part of the conversation, educate self on homelessness, volunteer, support as a community leader, and participate. And I have participate bolded up there because that's huge. Just showing up to the conversation is huge. I will tell you that when I stuck my nose in homelessness about 1.5 years, I thought I knew it all. I have never been so wrong in the last 1.5 years than I ever have been. So just knowing what is going on. Offer jobs, mentorships, and training. Invest in supporting affordable housing. Donate and support organizations helping address the homeless issues, food, money, clothes, etc. Pool and funnel resources. Assist authorities in a compassionate enforcement. Be the eyes and ears of our community. And then the last one, nothing. Local business cannot solve homelessness. Not much, honestly. Not our role to solve the issue. Businesses have no control. The government should be 100% responsible. Private businesses should not have to deal with these people at all. Just think about that for a minute. I read this and thought a lot of things. But it came down to, you're right. You are right. There's nothing that says, I'm sorry, I get emotional. There's nothing that says that as a business you have to solve homelessness. There's nothing that says as a church you have to solve homelessness. There just really isn't. But I think what we're asking is to show up and to help. I'm sorry. All right, the last question. Do you think that the opportunity of a low barrier shelter would lower visible homelessness? And I think we didn't really explain what the low barrier shelter was, so that's a whole nother conversation, but that is just somewhere where folks can go where there's rules, but there's not a lot of rules. A lot of our shelters in the area are very specific. For example, there's some that just take men. There's some that just take women and children. There's some that you can come, but you have to participate in our ministry. So there's a lot of rules that are tied to our shelters, which prevents a lot of folks that are homeless going to them. So a low barrier shelter would just open those doors for those folks to actually go somewhere. We would know where they're at. We would be able to have supportive services floating in there, and it might take them 1,001 times to go there to decide to do something different with their life, but at least gets them off the street. So for that, strongly agree was 43%, strongly disagree was 21%, and 35% were not sure. And not sure is okay, because sometimes that just means you need to ask a few more questions. So with that, we're going to save all of the Q&A until the end. So the next presenter you have is Miss Connie Bookman. So I will bring her up, and hopefully she won't get emotional on you guys.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I have had the most exciting career over the last 3 decades. As a social worker, discharge planner for the Baptist healthcare system, and then founded Pathways for Change in 2005, an 18-month faith-based addictions treatment program for court-ordered men and women. And then in 2012, we decided we wanted to put that program out of business. So we opened the Family Center in the middle of 3 area housing projects. We offered education, vocational training, counseling, everything someone needed to get out of poverty and to avoid the criminal justice system. And then in 2014, we opened a facility for homeless female veterans. But I have to say, of all that good work, what I'm doing today, leading this homeless reduction task force in Northwest Florida, I believe I'm making the most impact that I ever have in my life. Very exciting. Now you're gonna make me cry. This task force is following a best practice called collective impact. We have 200 members on 4 subcommittees researching and measuring everything that touches homelessness. The task force was launched in May 2021 with the intent of moving service providers and agencies out of their silos to brainstorm, collaborate, and strengthen partnerships, just like the city of Houston did. Houston decreased homelessness by 60% in the past decade, developing a similar collective impact model. And their mayor says, "We decided to work together as a collaborative system with standardized goals, processes, and strategies, rather than as individual organizations and government agencies, each trying to chip away at the problem on our own." Today, more than 100 entities in Houston area are working together to move the needle on reducing homelessness. Houston housed 28,000 people with a data-proven model called Housing First, and 90% has retained housing for at least 2 years. The mayor says by investing in proven, effective intervention, Housing First, we're making homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Roseanne Haggerty, CEO of Community Solutions, received a $100 million award from the MacArthur Foundation to replicate her successful model in 90 communities worldwide. She shifts the mindset that homelessness is permanent and retractable, that it is, in fact, solvable. And like Houston, she believes it's impossible to work in silos and be successful. She says we need everyone at the table, working and communicating together to get to functional zero. She measures success by the number of individuals housed, not the success of homeless programs. She believes that investments in reducing homelessness must be data-driven, targeted, and measurable, and in real time, and that data must be updated at least monthly. She believes in the by-name method. You must get to know your homeless people. I want to introduce you to Tom Edmondson and Brittany Harris. If you'd stand, if you're here, I hope. Yay, there's Brittany. They are social workers that are employed at the Pensacola Police Department, and they're practicing the by-name method. They're getting to know the homeless population personally, and they're successfully placing them in housing with wraparound services. Recently, Brittany and Tom met Joe from Mississippi, who was arrested in Mobile and ended up in Pensacola. It took about a week, but Brittany, Tom, and Joe came up with a solid plan and Joe returned to Mississippi and entered a group home where he would receive the support he needed. So Brittany and Tom, thank you for your good work. I know you're early boots on the ground, but you're doing it already, so thank you. Now, what has the task force accomplished in these past 2 years? We've taken an inventory of all current services and gaps in services. And thanks to Liz Kissel, we have an interactive dashboard that describes existing food programs, 300 of them, and a housing inventory on the myescambia.com website. We spent 5 months working alongside City Council to determine the most effective way to invest the $3.1 million they set aside to reduce homelessness. We assisted their consultant, Dr. Robert Marbut, a renowned expert on homelessness, by setting meetings with key stakeholders so he could assess our current strengths and weaknesses. The task force has adopted many of these recommendations as part of our 24-25 goals, such as moving from a culture of enabling to a culture of engagement and modifying ordinances. We addressed barriers that now allow homeless clients living in transitional housing programs to benefit from drug court, mental health court, and veteran specialty court. We worked with the Pensacola Police Department and Escambia Sheriff's Office and created a code for all calls related to homelessness to better track data. We supported the resurgence of detox beds at Lakeview Center, and we're very excited about their new central receiving facility that will launch this March, as well as the 30-bed crisis stabilization unit and the 80 beds dedicated to addiction assessment and treatment. We supported a mentor training program that offers critical support. Churches are forming groups to mentor a person or a family as they problem solve and access resources. We developed the Next Step Vehicles program, where 3 nonprofits assess clients to make sure that they can accept and maintain a donated vehicle. We're currently vetting Red Bridge Development Partners, a public-private partnership in Oregon. They have a design, build, finance solution for multifamily mixed-use affordable housing. Discussions are happening now, and if we can engage them, we hope that 600 new units will be developed with that much-needed housing and services. Still got another half page. We're advocating for the removal of exclusionary zoning laws and land use regulations that have limited the development of new housing. We hosted a community forum with Michael Raposa, CEO of St. Vincent de Paul in Pinellas County. He developed a homeless crisis response system for 16 counties and 10 continuums of care along Florida's central west coast. Allison Patton, our city councilwoman, and your next speaker will dive into the specifics of his important work. With the support of Mayor D.C. Reeves, Dr. Joe Savage, Southeastern Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, was invited to share the U.S. White House all-in plan that will reduce homelessness by 25% by 2025. An interactive session with 100 task force members helped us align our 24-25 goals with this plan, and Liz Kissel has taken the lead in bringing major partners together to create a local all-in plan. And we have our SMART goals set for the next 2 years. Now let me describe the key causes and 3 major categories of people experiencing homelessness. But before I do, I want to be very clear that we are here to serve the people that want help, the ones living on the margins of poverty and who are one car accident, one health issue, or a divorce away from becoming homeless. The bad guys, the people who are manipulating and taking advantage of the good-hearted people, will be urged to accept our offer of a bus pass to a place where they might have a support system. The guy who's flying the sign that's saying he's hungry and a veteran and he's neither will be able to move closer to family and friends so that we can focus our attention on the most vulnerable. So quickly, what are the key causes of homelessness? Obviously, a lack of affordable housing. We have a housing crisis because legislators have been taking money set aside for affordable housing from the Sadowski Fund and using it for other endeavors. The population of Florida is 22 million. And the mishandling of affordable housing funds have left 8 million low-income households who spend more than 50% of their income on housing in a very vulnerable position, many times pushing them into homelessness. In 2018, the Haas Center said Escambia County was lacking 7,800 affordable housing units. In 2022, HUD provided 8,000 housing vouchers for homeless veterans, but there's a lack of housing, so they stay homeless. The Schimberg Center suggests that Escambia County has 38 beds available for over 100 individuals and only 1 bed for every 100 homeless families. And as Liz mentioned, there are 1,851 children in the Escambia school system who are homeless. The Haas Center report defined the cost of homelessness. In Escambia and Santa Rosa County, they estimated about 6,500 homeless people in 2018. And they used a midpoint of 3,500, and costs associated were 1.6 million on jail stays, 12.8 million on healthcare, ER visits, hospital stays, and mental health treatment. 13 million was spent on nonprofit initiatives, shelters, and outreach for a total of 27.4 million. Surprisingly, mental illness and substance use are numbers 4 and 5 for reasons for homelessness. The key drivers are poverty, lack of education, and unemployment. 50% of the people experiencing homelessness are in a temporary state. They're homeless for up to 2 weeks due to a crisis such as a job loss, medical issue, domestic violence, or a personal family crisis. I was involved in a call with a school teacher who said she had a student with 2 siblings who lost their father to suicide 2 days before Christmas. They were living with the dad's parents, who just gave mom notice that they had 45 days to find a new place to live, and mom is unemployed. Thankfully, the school navigators are helping this family find housing and support. 35 to 40% of homeless are homeless for more than 2 weeks, but less than a year due to an economic crisis or a legal issue, which takes about a year to clear up. Those experiencing chronic homelessness make up 10 to 15% of the population and have been continuously homeless for a year or longer without any periods of housing, and 100% suffer from a disability. Schizophrenia, bipolar, traumatic brain injury, substance disorder, personality disorder, and 100% suffer from trauma and PTSD. In the 1970s, psychiatric hospitals would have cared for the disabled, but they're closed, so now they're in our jails and on our streets. As business leaders, you have a voice. As business leaders, you must be involved in the solutions to end homelessness. You'll hear from Ted Corcoran, president of the Fort Walton Beach Chamber, and how his leaders came to the table. And I'm here to help you sort through all the information you're going to hear today. I left my business cards in the back, And please call me, email me with your availability. I would love to take you to coffee and talk more about this. Again, thank you for being here and for caring.
If I can't get this one, then yes. Thank you. So hello, everybody, and welcome today. My name's Allison Patton. I am the District 6 City Council representative for the downtown area and the surrounding neighborhoods. I will tell you today you'll hear me sniffle, but it won't be because I'm crying. It's because I just had sinus and jaw surgery, and so I'm struggling a little bit through that. But I want to take just a minute to talk about some of the survey results, some of the things that are on your mind. For the past 3 years, I've been studying the issues of homelessness. First, as a member of the task force with Connie as co-chair of the Legal Services Criminal Justice Subcommittee, and now as a member of City Council. In fact, when I ran for City Council, homelessness was one of the top concerns that I had about our community. Since that time, I've learned a great deal about homelessness, about the legal landscape of homelessness, about how our system works, who's responsible for homelessness solutions in our community. I've worked closely with Liz and Wes from the county and others, the mayor, on how we can collaborate together as government leaders to address homelessness. And look at what resources we have, what are we missing, who's currently leading our homeless response, who should be leading it going forward, what is an effective system of response for homelessness, and how we can work collectively as governments or as governmental leaders to address it. So almost every day I speak with folks like you, business owners, members of the community, about what we can and can't do to address homelessness in our community. What are effective solutions? And when you were asked about what we can do to address homelessness, your answer ranged from collaborate and work together to enforce ordinances. So let's talk for just a second about whether the government can simply regulate its way out of homelessness, because I think that's on a lot of people's minds. I'm often asked, why can't we stop people from camping on public, parks? Why can't we stop people from panhandling on streets? And so let's dive in on that for just a minute. Panhandling is effectively holding up a sign asking for money. Holding up a sign asking for anything is effectively First Amendment free speech. People are allowed to do that. And so the idea of regulating the content of speech is a protected First Amendment right, and something that has been the subject of a lot of court actions. We can regulate safety concern and towards safety concerns, towards health concerns, but not the content of people's speech. So it's important to understand that. As far as camping is concerned, there has been a great deal of recent case law on this issue, mostly arising out of the western side of our country, the Ninth Circuit. And essentially the Ninth Circuit has held that the Eighth Amendment, the Cruel and Unusual Punishments Clause, prohibits communities from enforcing or criminalizing people sleeping on the streets if they can't offer them adequate alternative shelter. Now, that is not the law in all jurisdictions, or at least the holdings in the Ninth Circuit, but it's generally accepted that you can't criminalize homelessness. And so what that means, in order to enforce camping or other ordinances, you've got to have a place to be able to offer that individual to sleep that's an alternative to the place that they are on public property. That's often a low barrier shelter. That's often a place where they have the ability to sleep overnight and maybe be during the day and not on the streets. So those are very high level. There's a lot more complicated than that, but the Supreme Court has actually taken up a case out of Grants Pass, Oregon, and we'll be deciding some of these issues relating to camping here in the next year. So let's talk real quickly about our who's responsible for addressing homelessness in our community. You guys said, 54% of you anyway, said the government. Whether that's federal or local, it's not clear, but the government. 20% said that the nonprofits in the community are responsible for addressing homelessness. Well, from the federal government standpoint, homelessness operates through something called a continuum of care, the homeless response system. And the continuum of care is made up of nonprofits and other organizations addressing homelessness in a geographic area. In our case, Santa Rosa and Escambia counties. And that continuum of care is led by a lead agency. And that lead agency is responsible for applying to HUD for the federal dollars to come to our community to address homelessness. We also have, of course, local government dollars that are more focused on housing, affordable housing, or housing vouchers. The lead agency is responsible for making the applications for the funds, for allocating the funds, and then local nonprofits can also apply for the funds. So that is essentially the way the government has structured our homeless response system. But for years in many communities, including ours, the COC really operated separately from the government. So communities assumed that the nonprofits would largely solve homeless issues in the community. That is, until those homeless issues became so pervasive that they became community-wide issues. However, the way the system operated really meant that the government weren't at the table. I liken it a little bit to the school board. They operate separately in their own silo. And local government, particularly where the community becomes concerned, now needs to be part of the solution. And in the way the COC has been structured here, the government really hasn't had that seat at the table. But that's where we find ourselves recently, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we're going next. So first, let's just quickly talk about the homeless response system. Is this the pointer? Yeah, okay. So what's an effective system of response? What do we do in a community to effectively reduce homelessness? I've worked with, Liz and I went and visited Pinellas County, where this particular homeless chart was given to us, our homeless response system chart. But I've talked to folks who spearheaded the Houston homeless response system and other communities around Florida. So have gotten a lot of input on what works, what is effective. And it's the same themes are true no matter who you talk to, maybe a little bit different flavors. So let's go over this real quickly. So first, there are really 5 critical elements of a homeless response system. First is the street outreach. You've met Brittany today. I don't know if Tom's here. The city has hired 2 street outreach people to go out every day to talk with homeless, to figure out what their needs are, to get them into shelter. We need a robust street outreach, and it doesn't necessarily all need to be provided by the government, but we need a robust street outreach process to interact with homeless, to find out what their needs are, and to get them off the streets. Number 2 is the coordinated entry process. And that is really the front door to the system. Bringing people in, assessing their needs, getting them stabilized, and working on getting them into more permanent housing. Third is a low barrier shelter. That's that temporary shelter right there. That low barrier shelter provides an opportunity for people on a temporary basis to be able to sleep somewhere off of the streets, for street outreach workers, for even police who run into folks who may be doing minor criminal activities, to bring them to a shelter, to have them stabilized there, to hopefully get them connected to the services and keep them off of the streets. And then most critical to this system is housing. And so housing comes in multiple forms, but without housing, none of this works. So think about it. If we bring somebody into a temporary shelter through the front door, but we can't get them out the back door, then that shelter is going to fill up and the system's going to bog down. The one thing I really learned, and I think Liz and I came away after visiting Pinellas County as an aha moment, is their shelter turns over every 90 to 120 days. And it doesn't turn over because people are going back out the back door into homelessness. It turns over because they're going out the back door into housing. If you look at the different types of housing, rapid rehousing, that's at the foundation of the Houston model, is bringing people who can support themselves and who can function right back into housing and getting them off the street, temporary shelter, into housing. Transitional or bridge housing, that's for folks with addiction, mental health problems, need some period of time where they're transitioning and then able to go into more stable housing. And then temporary and supportive housing. Temporary housing with support, maybe somebody who just needs 6 months of support to help them work through issues, and then they can become self-sufficient. Some people need permanent supportive housing. There are folks that I met on the street during the point in time count over the last couple of days who need permanent supportive housing. They have mental disabilities or physical disabilities, and they will never be able to live on their own. And guys, there's a lot of federal dollars available for this. This isn't something that the community necessarily has to support, but we got to build it, right? We have to have it, and we don't really have it right now. And then finally, the fifth is prevention. And really, that could be the first. You've heard a lot about it in the surveys. We need to prevent people from falling into homelessness. And it's so much less costly to help somebody pay their rent for a month or to pay their utilities so they can stay in their place versus falling into homelessness and having to start all over again. So that's what an effective system looks like. It's not really complicated, although getting all the pieces and parts in place is a bit complicated. So how do we get to the right place in our community? Ron Book, who's head of the Miami-Dade Homeless Trust and a leader in the state and nationally, said that to address homelessness, you need 3 things. You need leadership, you need a plan, and you need funding. And so what we need to do, frankly, is we need to develop our leadership for this issue. And right now, as a result of Dr. Savage's visit, our COC is getting technical assistance from HUD to develop and stand up a leadership board, a COC leadership board, with members of the community and a strong governance structure. That leadership board will hopefully be formed by the spring and will include members from all aspects of the community, including the business community. And then a plan. That board is responsible for developing and implementing the strategic plan for our community. And then funding. There is not enough money coming from the federal government, the state government, to really address homelessness. And I will tell you that we're going to need to think harder about this as a community. There's something called a Funders Council, which I hope we will set up as part of this governance board, where people will be brought together in a room, people who have ideas about funding, thinking about gaps, thinking about resources, and putting together a funding plan for our community. Sorry, I'm trying to stay on track, but it's not always easy. So as a result of all of that, I would say it's important to understand that any community that's really doing this right, though, is not going to do it just through outside governmental sources of funding. You need private donations. You need the business community to stand up, and that is a common theme. And you'll hear a little bit more in just a minute from Ted about that. So to close, for such a system to work, we can't work in silos. All of our community must work together. Our nonprofits must work together from the same set of principles and guidelines. All clients of the system are everybody's clients, and we need to have a mindset. But just like the providers, I think the community needs to have that mindset as well. For those of you in the audience, we need to unite as we take these next steps. What can you do? What are the talents that this group has? We need affordable housing. We need permanent supportive housing. We need landlords who are willing to participate in programs. We need a low barrier shelter, and we need the funding for that. That's a very expensive endeavor to build and to operate. And so I just ask that you think about this as you hear. There's a way forward, but without participation from the entire community and commitment, we're not going we're not going to get it done. There has been so much work that's been done in the past year. The pieces are falling into place right now. We're at that point where we can really do this. So I just ask you, as we take these next steps, to partner with us, to think about how you can plug in. Let's use our talents, our treasure, our time, to really make a difference here. Thank you very much. And most importantly, our next speaker needs actually no introduction. Here's our mayor, D.C. Reeves.
Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to bounce back. It's kind of resonated with me. Liz mentioned seeing these survey results and kind of a, that just from a human scale, kind of the jarring, that's not our job response from one of the folks. I went too far, sorry. And it was funny, I was reading that, and I know a lot of you may know my background here. On one hand, Connie Bookman, my mom, has spent her entire life trying to help folks in need. And I've also been a downtown business owner, as many of you know, and have felt some of the negative impacts that you talk about, you email me about. And I read that, and I kind of thought to myself, if I hadn't had that background, even though that's jarring to me now, I couldn't honestly tell you that I wouldn't have answered that the same way. And what I think it really comes down to is that exact term, whose job is it? And is it the government's job? Is it nonprofit's job? And I think the choice we have to make as a community, as a government, as a city and county, as businesses is, are we gonna make it someone else's job, or are we gonna make it our job? And what I mean is, everybody could play that game. Certainly the city could. We get no federal funding. That doesn't come through, that doesn't come to the city. So do I say it's the COC's job? And does the COC say that there's not enough nonprofits doing a certain amount of service and it's not, they're trying, but it's not their job? So everyone can play that game. And I think at the end of the day, how we're gonna get somewhere and change answers like that is that we just accept that it's all of our job. Now, I say that saying why I'm so appreciative of Todd and everybody putting this together is that if you're gonna be part of the solution, then you need to be part of this conversation. And yes, there's been lots of task force meetings and lots of conversation around this, Dr. Savage coming into town. It's not from lack of effort, but my expectation would be, if I'm going to be asked to be, that this is part of our job as a community, that the community be brought along with it. So I think as the mayor, as the city, certainly business owners deserve that respect as well, is that if they're going to be asked to be part of this solution, that they're brought along with how we get there. So I was really up here just to talk a little bit about some of the things that we are doing. A few have been mentioned already. So we spent about $250,000 of recurring investment, both on our Tom and Brittany. We're very excited to have our community response team in place. That was born from meeting with mayors all over the country, and some that are dealing with this issue at a significantly higher level, especially on the West Coast, that they had seen a lot of progress and traction with is this type of model. So very, very excited to have that up, as well as we've hired 2 additional CRA officers in the urban core. So we had 2, we now have 4. So that's folks that, and you probably know, some of you downtown business owners probably know, at least our first 2 guys that do a great job out there and see them during the day. Now we have someone that's out there nights and weekends. You mentioned there has been some ordinance changes from a safety perspective. The one that just passed that actually, I believe, went into effect yesterday was the public safety right-of-way ordinance that doesn't allow anyone to be interacting with vehicles while they're in the roadway. And there will be a 30-day grace period on that. And of course, our police department and Chief Randall, I know Captain Goss is here, could certainly answer any questions that you may have about that. So that is one change that we've made. And Dr. Savage, we mentioned, we're very gracious to have him and his entire organization be able to come down and continue to give support to our experts to continue to find solutions. Also, this is as of a few days ago, or really yesterday actually, that we finalized it. We're going to be, you've heard about Pensacola Motor Lodge, that the CRA has invested $1 million into the Motor Lodge for some low-income housing. We will close on that on February 16th. So from that point, we'll already have our letter of intent ready to go. So in the hours after February 16th, we'll have that out and looking for some of our low-income housing providers that have, we're doing it with a letter of intent. And what that means is we're looking for people who have gotten these projects across the finish line. It's not an RFP that who's going to do it the cheapest. What we're looking for is saying this is the $1 million that the city is putting up as a subsidy to be able to provide this type of housing. And so we're excited to see what kind of conversation comes back from that. Last thing, I'll mention that on the city side of what we're doing right now is I am, if you've been following, I am a believer in an opportunity center, a low barrier shelter, because I'm data driven and that's what I look at, and I've seen the success that they've had. And I have asked John DeCarmine, who is running the low barrier shelter, 23-acre low barrier shelter, $4 million annual operation in Gainesville, to come in and consult with us. He'll get here in March. And he will be meeting with the community, meeting with you guys, and in a similar way that Dr. Savage did, to start talking about solutions. And just to give you some insight, I'm actually really, I asked that last question to be in here. Do you think an opportunity center, low barrier shelter would lower visible homelessness? The one thing that I'm encouraged by is I don't think that this would have been the pie chart of answers 5 years ago. I think there's some misnomer out there that if you have a center like this, that somehow attracts homelessness to your community. And my answer to that in press conferences has been, the homeless community is already here. They're already here. So if we're going to, so I find it encouraging that we see, and I understand some people may not even know what that is, but the fact that 43.5% look at that now as a viable solution to reduce homelessness and visible homelessness. And I'll tell you, I'll leave you with a couple of the numbers that he mentioned in Gainesville. $4 million operation. The city and county are responsible for about $1.5 million of that funding. So there's other funding sources, the VA, but also community charitable donations as well. And obviously that's a significant, I'm not suggesting that I would think Pensacola would start with a $4 million annual operation, but what they've done is they've taken they track everything. How many people come in, how quick they're in housing, and how long they stay in housing. They were turning people from the front door into housing in 45 days. And if I remember, our experts could confirm this, I believe ours is a year at this time. And they had got it all the way down to 31 days at one point. So that's certainly data that speaks to me. Just as much, they've reduced homelessness by 40% in the city and visible homelessness by 53%. And so when you do lower those barriers, and it's not what religion you are, and it's not if you are on or off a substance, it's not what your mental health situation is, that's how we can now go, as Connie mentioned, that's how we can now go out in the community and make sure that we can clearly identify the difference between the folks looking for hands up and hands out. We can't do that right now without that type of facility. So I'm a big believer in that. We'll continue to push that forward. I know Councilwoman Patton and I have talked at length about the remaining ARPA dollars that we have towards homelessness, and that really being a 100% investment into being able to create this kind of center. So thank you for taking on this conversation, and just you being here, number one, allows us to better educate everybody on what's going on. But it really is that first step of what we talk about. It's trying to make this all of our job, that it's a commitment from all of us. And you certainly have my commitment on everything that the city can do to reduce homelessness and to make sure that we're helping the people who want help. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you, Pensacola, for that rousing introduction. That was very well done, Todd. If I'd known the mayor was not going to wear a tie, I wouldn't have. I'm coming over here to Pensacola, the big city of Pensacola. And I missed the introduction by Todd, no doubt. What he started off with is, who would like to be in charge of the homeless shelter? Those who are interested, come sit up on the stage. Folks, if you don't know, my name is Ted Corcoran. I'm the president of Greater Fort Walton Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to tell you about our story. When I moved to Destin in 1990 in the hotel business, there were 2 traffic lights. For those who've been there at that time, there were 2 traffic lights from Destin all the way to Sandestin, and there was about another 2 to Panama City. That's when the stores used to close after Labor Day. You all remember that concept here. So this is an interesting fact as things transitioned here. Prior to 1990, Northwest Florida was not even a top vacation destination in the United States. By 2010, we are now a top 50 destination in the world. And along with that comes all those people, comes all the side effects that come along with all those people coming here. So when I started as a Chamber of Commerce in 2005 is when panhandlers started begging at the base of the Brooks Bridge. That's the bridge that takes you over to Okaloosa Island. So the store owners in downtown say, what are we going to do about this? And they go to the police. And the police can't do anything about it because of all the ACLU laws and all that kind of stuff that we know about. So then they go to the city council, and they say the same thing. So then they come to the chamber. They say, we're the largest membership organization in Okaloosa County. We have labeled ourselves at the Fort Walton Beach Chamber of Commerce as the most influential organization in Okaloosa County. So as a member-based organization, when our members are coming to us asking for something to be done, we have to do something. So what we did in 2007, many of our board members at that time were on the United Way. And they said, let's get the United Way board to hold a workshop. And that's exactly what happened in 2007. And it was so interesting that we had it at a local church. And I'll never forget this, because when we were walking into it, there was a real homeless guy in front of the door. He had purposely camped out there overnight. Remember that? Do you remember that? Yes. So during the course of the workshop, the little old ladies who were there would say, oh my gosh, we've got to feel sorry for these people. We can't, we have to take care of them. And the homeless guy who had a Crocodile Dundee knife came up to the microphone and said, I disagree with you, ma'am. This is our chosen lifestyle. And at that time, we realized we're not feeling sorry for those people. And that's exactly what happened. So it was an interesting thing, because the outcome of that workshop was, we need a men's shelter. Hooray. I say, United Way, are you on this? They said, we'll see. 6 months later, we came back again. We had the exact same gathering of people, again with the United Way, great people, taking the lead on this. And once again, the community said, we need a men's shelter. So after that, I met with every single nonprofit that has helping those who are down on their luck in their mission statement to say, hey, are you on this? I'm a Chamber of Commerce guy. We plan pirate festivals and networking events. We don't know about homeless. And ultimately what ended up happening was the concept with the nonprofits is they would say 2 things. One, we only have a staff of 2. And our board chair, who we would chat with, the board chair that you would chat with the nonprofit, says, oh, I'm not saddling my organization with that. So what went by, so then they'll have to talk to our chamber people. So in 2007, I asked my board chair, you want this? No. 2008, you want this? No. 2009, do you want this? No. 2010, do you want this? No. And finally in 2011, I asked that lady right there, said, do you want this? And she said yes, because it's important for the quality of life in Okaloosa County. And it reminded me, I was just in Denver in April, right, for a little vacation. And I went to the Coors Field, and I went to this and this and this. And what's the story I told everyone I came back? Man, they got a lot of homeless people there. The quality of life in Denver is obscene right now, and that's my memory of our trip to my trip to Denver, and I can't have that again. So Lisa Jo Spencer, our chair and attorney, we said, let's have another workshop. I said, good, let's have lunch, because chamber people love to come to lunch, and everyone in the community is invited. Every church, military, everybody's there. There's 200 people ultimately that ended up being there. I said, let's have lunch. Who's going to sponsor it? Now, if I'm sponsoring a lunch for the military, or for pets, or for kids, we're lining up for sponsors. Not one sponsor said, I'm going to buy lunch for a workshop geared towards homeless. So this was the first time the chamber realized, oh, we're going to have to pay for this. And that was our first time that we got into that game plan. So I asked my friend Lisa Jo Spencer, I think it's important. So in 2011, Lisa Jo, an attorney, former JAG in the Air Force, said, okay, let's take this on. Lisa Jo, why don't you come up here and tell these nice people from Pensacola what you were thinking about that day.
Well, I too, as Ted said, no idea what I had gotten myself into. However, I knew that this was something that needed to happen and realized after going to different meetings and stuff, just as Ted had said, if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. So we put together, myself and several other just business people. I mean, I'm an estate planner. I don't know anything about any of this. But we said, well, we're going to have to figure this out. We did a lot of what you guys are doing. Talk to some of those same experts, talk to people, and put ourselves out there. And I have to tell you, just as you guys are doing, you think it's the panhandlers, you think it's the vagrants, there's so much more to it. It is huge. And where we thought we were going to go, you know, your path takes where your funding is. That's huge. And so we did end up finally getting that. A men's shelter was the first thing we were able to do. And it was amazing. And what the community has done, and we're called Community Solutions, the group that oversees it. And I was so honored to watch this grow and work with the nonprofits. We're fortunate that we have Bridgeway in our community as a partner and who now runs One Hopeful Place for us. But I just want to encourage all of you as business people, don't stick your head in the sand. This makes our businesses so much better. I didn't want to take my grandkids downtown to have to run into folks. You know, I mean, it was a truly selfish reason I got into it. But boy, what an incredible, incredible blessing it has been to get to know all of these folks. When I go out to One Hopeful Place, they're wonderful. They're so thankful. They're so grateful. And when the community, you know, brings a tray of water or, you know, whatever, it's so cool to see. So just don't stick your head in the sand. Put your money where your mouth is with this stuff too. You've got to invest in it because the money is what it takes. And it's very, very expensive, but it is so worth it and your community will be blessed.
All right then, Lisa. So that's the guidance. That's the guidance from our chair in 2011, as we just mentioned. And once again, we had that workshop. And once again, for the third time, we have to have a men's shelter. That was the determination. At the time, interestingly enough, there was no discussion about having a single women's shelter. At that time, it was determined we don't need that. We have in Okaloosa County a shelter for single women with children, and we have an organization for families and kids, et cetera. So we didn't need that. So once again, I asked our nonprofits once again, because they've changed. They've cycled. The executive director has cycled, and the board chair has cycled. And what I say is this, what I say to chamber members right now is this, don't think of us as the chamber, but think of us as the community, because we're the one organization in the community comprised of businesses, nonprofits, churches, government, military, individuals. Our mission is we are a community development organization that advocates for businesses across Okaloosa County, creating greater opportunities for all. And as Lisa Jo mentioned, our chamber philosophy is, if we don't do it, who will? And we sat around the board table, and we looked around, and we chatted with everyone in town, and we said, shit, I guess we have to do it. And that's exactly what we said. And the board, we just got lucky. We had that board there all together, and they said, we have to take this on. And as a result of that, we needed a location. The city, as it turns out, had an existing facility, a former waste treatment plant, located 7 miles north of 98. I'll let you Google what other words are for waste treatment plant. You can use your own analogies to that. But what you had is a couple of buildings with a lot of turrets that used to churn the stuff that they churned there. The building was, the complex had been empty for quite some time. And the government said to us, the city government said, we'll give you the land, and that's it. County government elected not to participate whatsoever, so we got the land, we have the space now, and as Lisa Jo mentioned, here was the key thing. The key thing was, when we have this facility, all the vagrants are going to go up there, because the vagrants, as we know, are the face of homelessness here in Escambia County and Santa Rosa County and around the world. And if we build this thing, they'll all go up there and things will be solved. And we said, hooray. So in 2014, we got a state appropriation from Senator Gates and Representative Gates at that time for $300,000 to convert one of those buildings. We formed the name of Community Solutions of the Emerald Coast before we knew about the bigger company over there. That's why I called the Emerald Coast. We decided to do it via the research. Housing first, research, low barrier shelter, get them in, let them just live and survive and feed them, et cetera, et cetera. We came up with the name One Hopeful Place. And the mission we created at that time was One Hopeful Place is the front door to permanent housing and provides an end to the cycle of homelessness in Okaloosa County. We were a little off on that one, but it sounded good when we wrote it at that time. So we converted a pole barn to 11 beds and opened up in the fall of 2016. 11 beds. I was in charge of it. I would drive up and open the gate to this facility. I'm not advocating that's going to happen here. I'm just saying what happened there. So what we quickly discovered, as Lisa Jo just mentioned, the urban camper's not going. They're not going. But who is going are all the less visually unhoused. So since the fall of 2016, 375 people have gone through that, of which 195 have found housing with the staff assistance. That's 52% of those people have found housing and moved on. Other participants are working there. They need the hand up. If that be the case, they're finding housing. They're working, they're saving money, and off they go. And it's interesting because we decided not to call them residents because we didn't want them to think like they were staying a long time. We wanted to call them participants. So we referred to those folks as participants in that program. Of the 375 that were housed there, 74 were veterans, of which 57% moved into housing. We always have 1 to 2 beds per night for housing. It currently is 50 beds for men, and we opened up another shelter about 3 years ago, 17 for women. 60% of the participants that are going there are finding housing. So how has it been advantageous for the chamber? Well, the chamber has this type of forum. We have events, we have staff, we have media connections, we have volunteers. All of those who have bought into the program have elected to participate. And when we're at a chamber event, when we do check presentations, et cetera, yes, I'm going to bias it and do those for One Hopeful Place because we're running it. And when a nonprofit of some other member, because we have 100 nonprofits, as certainly the chambers do, 100 of them, they'd say, why can't we get that quality time of check presentation? I said, when you take over the shelter, I'll give you that time. We have to be biased on that situation. So an example, we did a check presentation at one of the One Hopeful Place, at one of the chamber events, and our members who are out there such as that, start thinking One Hopeful Place, One Hopeful Place. And we had a bank, Bancorp South, who saw an email from their national headquarters that said there's a community project for the national thing for Bancorp South. And because they had learned about this program, they were intrigued in it. Bancorp South applied for that, $500,000 from Bancorp South to help us renovate that men's shelter. If it had been an other entity, an individual nonprofit, perhaps they would not have been as engaged, but because we are there as a spokesperson for it, they knew about it and elected to follow up accordingly on that. So it's interesting as I look out in the room now, and this is our community, this is everywhere. This is our community leadership and elected officials. There's 3 ways of looking at this, right? One is you understand the difference between unhoused, those trying to change their lives, and the vagrant. We're in that category, a couple of people on that. Then there's those who lump everyone into the vagrant category, and that's all they can visualize, the face of homelessness, which is the current city council in Fort Walton Beach right now. They just lump everyone into that category. Or those who say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. That's the 3 categories of folks, the way I see it, and the way the folks we've encountered. So let me share with you some of the demographics of what we've had. We only allow Okaloosa County residents are given admission priority, right? As I mentioned, there's 50 beds for men, 17 beds for women. The average length of stay currently is 165 days for males and 153 days for women. The majority of the reason is that there's no housing. There's no housing right there. The average rental house in Fort Walton Beach right now is $2,200 for a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom unit. And of course, we know teachers and other people who are down their luck are not able to afford that quite amount. So in December, of the 67 people, 50 and 17, here's what we had. In December, 24 were born in Okaloosa County. I can't tell you how many times some of the people working there, and their high school classmate is coming there because they're down on the luck. 46% so 24 were born in Okaloosa County, 46 indicated they lived in Okaloosa County. So that point about they're moving from Pensacola, we always get that, well, Pensacola's shuttling them over to our county or Mobile shuttling them around. That doesn't seem to be happening at all. 21 of those men in December were veterans, 7 Army, 6 Air Force, 6 Navy, 2 Marine. 30% are working full-time, 31% are disabled. 9% are waiting on their disability, 16% are actively looking for jobs, and remember the demographic of who these folks are, right? Some of them have done crazy things in their life that doesn't make them the highest person to be hired, so they have to kind of work through that. So 16% are actively looking for jobs, 2% are participating in drug court, where they must find a job, and 12% are doing nothing. Just a fact. They're doing nothing. These aren't perfect people. So as Lisa Jo mentioned, in 2020, Bridgeway came in to help us out. They're doing a spectacular job. They have 2 full-time staff, 1 part-time, and some volunteers. They are now instructing them on budget training, job skills. Innisfree, located right here. Innisfree has a couple of hotels over on Okaloosa Island. They've sent their culinary person, their housekeeping person, their maintenance person to train them. Some of our people at One Hope Place are working at the hotels. And by the way, they can stay for a year. That's our motto there. They can stay for a year. So to overcome, for all this time, it's been free. It's been free because it just seemed like the way to go. But as of February 1st, to support the recovery journey each participant is undertaking at One Hopeful Place, the very important educational component of budgeting is being added to help prepare our participants for their next steps, which is renting and living in their own space. This change will also supplement the high cost of operating such a facility by assisting with ensuring the financial sustainability of One Hopeful Place. So starting February 1st, $100 per week participant. $100 if they are eligible, if they have income from anywhere, working, a disability, et cetera. All persons who are physically and mentally able to employ must obtain employment within 30 days of occupying a bed at One Hopeful Place. Obviously, if there's some wiggle room in that, but that gives you a general idea what our plans are for that. So those 12% of people more than likely will be moving out in March 1st because we're taking it seriously enough because there are enough people in the community that want to turn their lives around, and this is the opportunity for it. So interesting enough, I mentioned what our mission was back in the day. We've changed our name from One Hopeful Place Homeless Shelter to One Hopeful Place, a campus changing lives to better our community, which is certainly what we feel we've done. Our mission now is One Hopeful Place offers programs and services for those seeking self-sufficiency. You can see the difference with what we've learned through the time frame. Again, men's shelter is 50 men, women's shelter is 17. We have a cold night shelter, if you're not aware how that works. There's a big building we renovated. It's got 48 bunks. When it gets below 40 degrees, those people are offered to stay there complimentary. Somewhere between 30 and 45 days. We've done that for the last 3 years. That's a complimentary service we offer to the community. And we have a day program where people who are down on their luck can go up there 3 days a week. They can get a meal, shower, a load of laundry. Last year we had over 1,000 visits. Now certainly some of the same ones are coming back, but 1,000 visits in that case. And because we have some land there, we call park and sleep. Instead of sleeping in Walmart parking lots, et cetera, we have allowed them to sleep there. We had 45 cars that stayed there last year. So to answer the question on this, the question is, can local business solve homelessness? No, no one can solve it, but we can certainly assist in addressing it. And I think that's what we've done over there. By offering these programs and services, we segregate those who want to change their lives and those who don't. Remember, 60% of those people that stayed with us found housing. The panhandler is not staying there. And we are now to that point working with our city council, who's very adamantly about addressing the vagrant and so on and so forth, which we all are. We understand that they are the face of homelessness. We've had 200 plus people, as I mentioned, who have turned their lives around. as a result of this situation. Since 2016, our chamber has spent over $200,000 of our funds to run this organization. People, because of our sponsors like Cox, I'm sure David Delliman is somewhere here, Kristen Longley, because of the two of them, Cox and Cox Media, because of their community partnership of our Chamber of Commerce, they have said to us, we want to certainly promote our name as we can, but we also want to invest in the organization that's doing great things for the community. So David, as I recall, for those of you who certainly know David Delliman, he was around that table way back in the day when we said, yes, we're going to run that homeless shelter. So $200,000. We have never received any funds from Okaloosa County or local cities. We've asked, and we will continue to ask, but we have not so far. Community Solutions currently right now is basically a committee of the chamber. I'm the chair of it. And we're responsible for all our funds. We actually have our community outreach director in our chamber building, and we make our money from donations, grants, and fundraisers. So coming up in 2024, we have a building we're going to renovate into a medical facility. We've just received an ARPA grant of $180,000 from the county through the Federation to add some transitional housing on there. And I'll share this with you. It's really interesting. Of the 400 people who have stayed at One Hopeful Place, as well as the hundreds who attend the cold night shelter, and the thousands who use the facility for the day center, I've met maybe 5. It's not my job to meet them. There's other people doing that. When I walk through the facility weekly on tours, they have no idea that we've been on this for 18 years, working on it for 18 years, and open for 7. In 2023, my friends, we lost $140,000. We lost $140,000. So why do we do it? And I want to bring up Walter Arrington right there, who I did not meet until about a year or so ago. Walter Arrington, please share your story, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. My name's Walter Arrington. I am a huge beneficiary. I am here today because of One Hopeful Place. I am also standing before you today. I'm a social worker here locally who works with our unhoused population full time. I know many of y'all professionally now out here in the audience. But what One Hopeful Place meant for me in my journey is when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had a lot of stuff going on, as you can imagine. And I ended up homeless. I was chronically unhoused. 4.5 years of homelessness, 2 of it here in Pensacola. I've been on the street corner down here on Palafox. But what One Hopeful Place offered and what the low barrier shelter offers, at least for me, was I could stay there at no cost. Initially I thought I needed to go get a job and I needed to do all these things. And what I realized was that every time I got a job, I fell off the rails. And so One Hopeful Place allowed me to leave and come back and leave and come back. And it was finally on that 3rd time of exiting and coming back that the suggestion was made, maybe you need to sit here tight for a little while and just volunteer around the campus. And so they gave me that space to make the decision on my own. That was something different than I had ever seen or heard before, because it was always program this, do this, you need to do this. And it was a suggestion. I listened to the suggestion. Fast forward a few months, next thing you know, I'm getting into the appropriate level of care to handle the underlying issues that caused me to be homeless, that caused me to be unhoused. Transition to transitional housing. Next thing you know, I'm working in a warehouse here in Pensacola, managing it. Fast forward a couple years, I'm finishing up my degree at Pensacola State College, going to UWF to study social work, and then graduating with my master's in social work and working at Community Health of Northwest Florida. I got hired on to start the Unhoused Care Navigation Program. There's 2 of us now. Just don't think that you're just giving somebody a free place to stay. The ripple effects of what can be done through a low barrier harm reduction shelter that truly offers a safe place for people just to be and exist, and then make those decisions to address whatever they've got going on, has ripple effects that you cannot imagine. A lot of what's been said today, I just want to echo, we're at a bottleneck right now in this area. This is me taking off the cheerleader for One Hopeful Place, but we don't have places to put people. As a social worker, we can't get them housed quick enough. And what low barrier shelters offer is a place where we can, as professional social workers, work with these individuals, give them a safe space, and allow them to decide what they want to do. So thank you, Ted, for inviting me. And thank y'all for being here today and listening to a different way to address housing instability and homelessness.
And that is why we do it, right there. Those people like that who want to change their lives around. When I was preparing myself to come here today to try to impress the mayor with my tie, I decided I'd put on my AC/DC tie in the spirit of things, because sometimes running a homeless shelter is like a highway to hell. But today, my friends, for those about to rock on this subject, we salute you. For the AC/DC fans, thank you all for having me. I hope everything works out here in Escambia County.
So we're gonna. So we're going to call our presenters back up on stage. We have the QR code up here. If you use that, you can submit a question online, and then we'll read it up here. I'll be moderating. But first, a round of applause for our presenters as they come back on stage and take a seat. And while they're coming up, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Florida Power and Light for providing the coffee and the venue today. Thank you, Florida Power and Light. So Liko will be bringing up the questions here a moment, but I'll start off with a question that I think that's on everybody's mind. You know, Ted talked about they found, or the city gave them space 7 miles from your, I guess, urban core area. So I think the first question a lot of people have on their mind is where? Where would we do this? And are there any thoughts or ideas on where that might be? Whoever wants to take it.
Does that give you? I think that gives you an idea of exactly if we've picked a location yet or not. We're all looking at each other up here. I know, really, that's why I was looking over here, because these three women have been really at the forefront of investigating every option that we have. Again, I would say we've got somewhere in the range, I can speak for the city, we've got in the range of about $1.2 million of ARPA funding still remaining that will continue to be earmarked to homelessness. We're actually bringing to council our LOST, our local option sales tax carry forward, as well as our ARPA changes. And of course, those are dollars that need to be spent this year. But even with some of the minor changes that we're going to make to ARPA, I have committed and we've maintained that we'll continue to, and actually have slightly increased the dollars that had already been earmarked for homeless reduction. So, so that we are keeping that aside as our commitment, just for starters, and of course, primarily focused on finding where we would put it.
And I'll just add to that, we have been looking for a low barrier shelter location. Ideally, it would be a large building. Warehouses obviously come to mind first. And it's been interesting because, first of all, warehouses are very expensive, I've learned, and there aren't a lot for sale. And so, you know, we've looked at all options, whether it's, you know, buying land to then put, you know, a building on. We have some options, but if anybody in the audience has any ideas, obviously we're trying to place this in the right areas for the community where we can provide the services, but obviously where we're not impacting in unduly anyway neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So we're really trying to be strategic, but on the other hand, we need to find a place. And Wes, I thought you were going to come up here with us. Yeah, great. All right.
So got a question about Chitosi Forest, and with that, is that an example of a situation where if we had a low barrier shelter, would that be, a community that, you'd reach out to or bring into the fold? How would that work?
So I think, I am a huge fan of the model of Chitosi Forest because it follows you can't get any low barrier than Chitosi Forest. And it's small, insular communities, 20 to 30 people, very inexpensive. And it really follows the therapeutic model of care when you look at behavioral health models, therapeutic communities. And it's very inexpensive. You can put a Chitosi Forest, 5 or 6 of them across the county with minimal impact on surrounding neighborhoods. And that can provide that, let's say you have somebody that may not necessarily want to come out of the woods right yet, you can provide that care and support for them at a Chitosi Forest type model until they make that decision to then transition to whatever their pathway looks like. So it really gives somebody a space to just exist and be who they are. And it's a very inexpensive model.
But I will say, if somebody from Chitosi Forest wants to come into the low barrier shelter, I would see no reason why that wouldn't be totally fine.
So I've got a question about funding. Are the city or county currently providing operating support for any homeless shelters in the community?
I can just kind of talk about the county. So the county does have community partner applications that we do every single year where community partners can apply for that funding. And then through the budget process, it's kind of allocated. So it really just depends on what they're applying for. And then the county also does have Home ARP Fund, which is one-time funding, which is focused on the homeless population. The board did approve funding for that. We're about $2.9 million in affordable rentals is really what we're looking for the low moderate income folks. And then a pretty big chunk of that, just over $500,000, I think, is for supportive services that the community partners will be able to apply for. But as far as any other funding to actually operate a shelter, that's not really what we do.
I'll mention, I talked about bringing in John DeCarmine, and I'll say for me personally, I want as much clarity, and we continue to work through that. We've gotten some estimates from some of our local operators, but for me, I want to know, and I'm sure everyone who's going to be part of this solution wants to know and have clarity on what the financial, I guess, responsibility that we all are going to have, and have as much clarity around that. And what I mean is, I think the only thing worse than not having a low barrier shelter would be one that would be stood up and be closed in 3 months. I don't think that gets us anywhere, and probably, frankly, is almost worse than doing nothing at all. And we've seen some scenarios like that with some of our situations around here now. So I would just say, for me personally, a lot of the conversation I'm asking, and I would say the top deliverable that I would want from John as he's come in and has successfully operated a $4 million annual operating facility, is that we get as clear understanding as we can of what that cost is, so we can all get our arms around it and all as a community try to come up with what that solution is. Just going and getting the building first and not understanding all of that, I don't think is a responsible use of our dollars. And certainly I know we're all aligned in that, is as much fact finding as we can to make sure that that when this does stand up and it is open, that we're able to continue to sustain its success the way that they've been able to figure out how to do over in Fort Walton.
And utilize the participation from the participants. I think it's very important that they financially support, and they have the means to do that. So I'm very proud of you, Ted, for making that change.
Is there a size that you're looking for this type of shelter? Is that also to be determined based on budget and those sorts of things?
I think that's right, and I think obviously hearing from John and what he thinks our needs are based on kind of our homeless population in our community. Right now, the things we've been looking at are 5,000, 10,000, square foot warehouses in that range, or 10 to 15. But again, it really comes down to money. It comes down to what we're told we really need to have as in our community to address our issues.
Yeah, in short, the size I want is a successful one. That's the size I want. And so if it's 50, if it's 100, I don't think we have any preconceived notions. And again, to use the Gainesville example, they have 23 acres. They have transitional housing on site, and it didn't start that way. So that's why I'm excited to get some outside expertise that has seen it across the finish line and seen it grow. I think their insight into what our funding looks like, what our community looks like, I think that will give us a lot of guidance in terms of specificity around size. That's my opinion on that.
Right. So Fort Walton had property donated by local government. Is that a possibility here from the city or the county perspective?
I have asked that question, and we've talked about that at the county at length, and right now that does not seem to be an option.
I mean, from a city perspective, I think our issue it would be a lack of options because of lack of inventory, is what I'd tell you from the city perspective. I go into these meetings with mayors all over the country, and I'm listening to them talk about big generational projects, and they're like, here are all these acres of land that we've had over the that we've collected over the years through foreclosures, through whatever. We are an outlier in the city in that outside of park property, property that's being actively used, the city does not have possession of very much vacant property, at this point.
And I will say that the county has also reviewed property. A good share of our lots right now are going to infill housing to get that affordable housing, and a lot of them are for stormwater infrastructure. So we have definitely pulled those properties, looked at parcels, seen if we have something big enough, but most of them are honestly where we would consider okay to place something like that are spoken for. But obviously, open to looking for other parcels that would need to be purchased.
And a question about the land development code. The city's reviewing that right now. Anything that could change with affordable housing that would impact?
Yeah, so I've mentioned we haven't looked at our land development code in the city in 16 years, and I always say in Pensacola years that's like 50, because we imagine what downtown looked like 16 years ago even compared to now. I will tell you, when I went to the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Washington, D.C., I had 3 or 4 different sessions on a variety of things, on how you help veterans in your community, public-private partnerships, and one of the largest recurring themes is make sure you're looking at your land development code. So because whether that's the process of thickening neighborhoods, and just a good example, if it's not something you follow, is, and we have this here, but some communities don't allow an accessory dwelling unit, a garage apartment, in the back of and we do. But just to give you a conceptual idea of how you thicken neighborhoods, that maybe you can, instead of a lot that's a quarter acre that only allows you to build one ranch-style house, is it okay to have 2 attached townhomes? And sometimes that's met in, there can be some NIMBYism around that and some anxiety around thickening neighborhoods, what happens next to me. I always remind people of 2 facts in the city of Pensacola. Number 1, some of the most beautiful quadplexes that we have in the city are in North Hill that were built 100 years ago. That's number 1. And number 2, I always ask, raise your hand if you've ever lived in an apartment. And most people raise their hand. And when your kids move home, where are they going to live? They probably aren't living in a 5-bedroom house in North Hill. They're going to probably live in an apartment, a duplex, a quadplex. So we try to myth bust a little bit. Sometimes there's this unfair misnomer, especially now with our housing issues, that somehow thickening neighborhoods or having 3 or 4 units means there's going to be riffraff or there's going to be all of this activity. Have you seen the prices of what it costs to live somewhere? I mean, one of those units in a quadplex, I'm not even sure a teacher or one of our police officers could afford. So we've got to change the dynamic and really the rhetoric around thickening our neighborhoods, and we're going to look for opportunities to do that. So where we are is we're in an assessment. This is really an audit of what we're doing right now. We have experts from all around the community. They're going to be here for 5 full days. And that's really it's an audit. It says, why do you have 7 overlay districts in your downtown? Is that a good idea or is that a bad idea? They'll give their expert opinion, what they do around the country, and then the much larger, more robust community engagement, will this work, will it not, comes next. And just to give you an idea, the cost of the assessment is about 25% of the cost of the implementation. So this will be a long road. This is not something that happens quickly. And certainly we're going to be getting feedback from the community. But we're looking forward to that because we all know, and you have told us through surveys that we do, that housing is one of our #1 issues. And one way to address it is to take archaic code that hasn't been looked at or hasn't been changed for decades. So excited to see that and excited to start to engage the community in that conversation.
And just to add on to that, one of the ways in which a lot of communities are addressing particularly housing for homeless, but also housing more generally, or is through the development of tiny homes. And that's something that, historically, I don't think is permitted in the county, or at least in very specific, like mobile home park, for example, situations. Something I think that is permitted in the city, but that we should just take a look at. And I think it's, those kinds of solutions are things that we need to spend a little more time on in connection with our review of the Land Development Code.
Yeah. So we're a little bit over time. We have one more question. I think it's a very important one. For people in business who want to be more involved, where do they go and who do they connect with?
Start with me. Left my business cards in the back and a list of the 4 subcommittees. The advisory committee meets quarterly. That's a beautiful place for you to start, where each of the 3 subcommittees report to you quarterly, so you're hearing, what we're doing. And you can look at our website, reducinghomelessness.com.
Anybody else?
And listen, I spend probably 50% of my time on this. And, anybody in the community, I've talked to many of you as I look out in the audience about ways in which we can, work together. My door is always open. Please reach out to me, and I'm happy to then share with, the mayor, anybody else who needs to hear or who should be part of the conversation. So please contact me. My information's on the website.
And I will say from if you see any issues out there or anything like that, that's why we have Brittany and Tom. They do an awesome job. Certainly, we can get you contact information from a day-to-day perspective. Again, I'll reiterate, ideas about property, someone a friend of a friend, some type of facility that makes sense, that certainly we are in that mode. But what I would ask is really the way that you can help this the most today, I think, is sharing and conveying what you've learned a little today. That's the ask, I believe, is that we've got to change the notion that it's someone else's job. And then one way you can help do that, starting when you leave here, is by sharing what you've learned today, beating back some of these misnomers or misperceptions about what you may have thought coming in or what someone may talk about, is that we've got to change the narrative about what we're trying to do here, and that we are going to be able to do this together. So that's what I would say that we were asking for today.
And to follow up on that, this has been live streamed on the Chamber's Facebook page, so it'll be up there. So if you want to share that with anyone, and we'll have the video, we can share that with you individually as well. But if someone missed it today, you can share that with them, and that'll help get the information out as well. Again, I want to say thank you to all of the business organizations who are here today. This is an important conversation and one that the business community needs to be engaged on. Thank you to our panel. A lot of great information, great perspectives, and a lot of work going on already, but obviously a lot more to be done. Thank you to the Rex for hosting us, and again, thank you again to Florida Power and Light for providing the coffee, and we hope you have a great weekend.